Luckily, right before we hit the floor, he twisted his body and became a human cushion. I landed softly on top of him. The club's bass thumped through the floorboards, vibrating against my ribs as I lay sprawled across Luke Vance's chest. His eyes were closed, breathing deep and ragged, the faint scent of bourbon mixing with cedar cologne clinging to his skin. Around us, broken glass glinted under the dim neon lights, and the echo of the paramedics' departing footsteps lingered like a warning. The bodyguard, Mark, I'd finally learned his name, hovered at the door, his posture a mix of relief and unease. I pushed myself up slowly, careful not to jostle Luke. At 6'2", he was solid muscle, and even unconscious, there was a raw power in the set of his jaw, the way his fingers twitched occasionally as if still ready to fight. I brushed a strand of dark hair off his forehead, and for a second, he nuzzled into my palm, soft, vulnerable, nothing like the man who nearly slit Mark's throat an hour earlier. "Miss Lynn," Mark said, his voice low, "we need to get him out of here before the police arrive. The guys he tipped down, they're from the Cartwright crew. Bad news." I glanced at the unconscious men being wheeled out, their suits torn, faces bruised. Luke had done this alone? Even drunk, he'd taken down half a dozen grown men without breaking a sweat. It was equal parts impressive and terrifying. "Help me get him up," I said, sliding my arms under Luke's armpits. Mark hesitated, then stepped forward, keeping a safe distance from Luke's flailing limbs, and grabbed his ankles. Together, we hauled him toward the door, his feet dragging across the floor. The bouncers nodded at Mark, looking away as if they'd seen nothing, and we slipped out the back entrance into the cool night air. The Maybach was parked curbside, its sleek black exterior blending into the shadows. Mark popped the rear door, and we maneuvered Luke onto the leather seats. He groaned, rolling onto his side, and before I could pull my hand away, he latched onto my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong for someone half asleep. "Don't go," he mumbled, his voice slurred, eyes still shut. "Stay." My heart skipped a beat. This was the first time he'd spoken to me coherently, well, semi-coherently, while drunk. All the other times, he'd either been passed out, muttering nonsense about thirst or childhood dogs, or attacking anyone who got within arm's reach. Except me. Mark cleared his throat. "I'll drive. You can sit with him in the back. Keep him calm." I slid into the car next to Luke, and he immediately curled into my side, his head resting on my shoulder, arm wrapped tightly around my waist. It was the same way he clung to me that first night on the street, like I was a life raft in a storm. I stared out the window as the city lights blurred past, my mind racing. Why me? Mark had said I was the only person Luke didn't attack when he was drunk. That even his own grandfather couldn't get close. What was it about me that flipped that switch? We'd never met before that night 6 months ago. I was just a random corporate employee working late, someone who'd stopped to help a stranger out of boredom and a healthy dose of TikTok-induced curiosity. The car pulled up to a gated mansion in Beverly Hills, the iron gates swinging open at Mark's command. We drove up a long, tree-lined driveway to a sprawling modern house with floor-to-ceiling windows and a fountain in the center of the courtyard. It was the kind of place I'd only ever seen in movies, way out of my league. Mark killed the engine. "I'll get the door. Be careful, sometimes he wakes up disoriented." I nodded, gently brushing Luke's hair back again. He stirred, his eyes fluttering open. For a second, they were clear, sharp, intense, the eyes of a man who commanded respect, but then the fog of alcohol settled back in, and he smiled softly, a lazy, boyish grin that didn't match his reputation as a ruthless businessman. "Hi," he said, his voice warm. "You're pretty." I felt my cheeks heat up. "Luke, we need to get you inside." He shook his head, pulling me closer. "Don't want to. You're soft. Smell like vanilla." I didn't even wear vanilla perfume. It was probably the lotion I'd slathered on that morning, but he seemed to like it, burying his face in my neck. Mark opened the door, and Luke growled, low in his throat, his grip tightening on me. "Stay away," he snapped at Mark, his voice suddenly sharp, dangerous. "Don't touch her." Mark held up his hands, stepping back. "Boss, it's just me. We need to get you to bed." Luke ignored him, turning his attention back to me. "You're safe," he mumbled, pressing a kiss to my collarbone, soft, fleeting, almost unconscious. "I won't let anyone hurt you." My breath caught. This was the opposite of his usual drunk behavior. Instead of attacking, he was protecting. It was a strange role reversal, and I didn't know how to feel about it. "Luke, let's go inside," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "You're tired." He nodded, finallying his grip enough for me to slide out of the car. Mark helped me lift him to his feet, and we stumbled toward the front door. Luke leaned heavily on me, his arms slung over my shoulders, his weight nearly crushing me. I could feel the warmth of his body through his shirt, the steady thud of his heart against my side. The house was even more impressive inside, minimalist decor, expensive art on the walls, a staircase that curved up to a second floor. Mark led us to a bedroom at the end of the hall, its walls painted a soft gray, a king-sized bed with black sheets dominating the room. We lowered Luke onto the bed, and he immediately flopped onto his back, staring up at the ceiling. "Stay," he said again, reaching for my hand. "Please." I hesitated. Mark was standing by the door, watching us, his expression unreadable. Part of me wanted to run. This whole situation was crazy, dangerous, way beyond anything I'd signed up for. But the other part, the part that had taken that video 6 months ago, that had stayed with him on the street, that had accepted 50 grand to calm him down, that part was curious. Why did he trust me? What was he so afraid of when he was drunk that he felt the need to attack everyone except a stranger? "I'll stay until you fall asleep," I said, squeezing his hand. He smiled, his eyes drifting shut. Good. Mark quietly slipped out of the room, closing the door behind him. I pulled a blanket over Luke, then sat on the edge of the bed, watching him sleep. His face was relaxed, no longer tense with anger or fear. He looked peaceful, almost innocent. It was hard to reconcile this man with the one who'd taken down 6 gang members, with the ruthless CEO I'd heard whispers about at work, Luke Vance, the youngest billionaire in the city, the man who'd built an empire from the ground up before he was 30. I'd done my research after that first night. Luke Vance's parents had died in a car crash when he was 10, leaving him to be raised by his grandfather, a cold, distant man who'd pushed him to succeed at all costs. He'd dropped out of college at 20 to start his own tech company, which had exploded into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. But with success came rumors of ruthless business tactics, of fights in bars, of a temper so volatile it scared even his closest associates. And then there was the drinking. Mark had mentioned that Luke only drank when he was stressed, which seemed to be most of the time. But why did the alcohol trigger such extreme defensiveness? Was it trauma? A phobia? Something deeper? I sat there for an hour, watching him sleep, my mind wandering. I thought about my own life, boring, predictable, stuck in a dead-end corporate job where I was underpaid and undervalued. This was the opposite of that, exciting, dangerous, unpredictable. And for some reason, Luke Vance, the most unattainable man in the city, trusted me. Only me. Just as I was about to stand up and leave, Luke's eyes flew open. They were clear now, no trace of alcohol left, sharp, alert, suspicious. He sat up quickly, pushing me away, his hand reaching for the pocket where he usually kept his Swiss Army knife. Who are you? He snapped, his voice cold. What are you doing in my room? I froze. This was the sober Luke Vance, the one everyone feared, the one who didn't recognize me. Luke, it's me, I said, holding up my hands. Lynn, I helped you get home. You are drunk. I don't drink, he interrupted, his jaw tight. And I don't let strangers into my house. Get out. My heart sank. He didn't remember. Of course he didn't. Mark had told me once that Luke never remembered anything from his drunk episodes. He'd wake up with a hangover and no idea what had happened the night before. But it still stung, being dismissed so harshly after he clung to me like I was his lifeline just hours earlier. Your bodyguard called me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Mark. He said you needed help. You were in a fight at the club. Mark would never let a stranger near me, Luke said, standing up. He was shirtless now. I hadn't noticed when he'd taken his shirt off, and his chest was covered in a faint scar, a thin white line running from his shoulder to his ribs. Get out before I call security. I stood up, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. Fine. But for the record, I didn't want to be here. Your bodyguard paid me. Paid you? Luke raised an eyebrow, his eyes narrowing. How much? 50,000, I said, defiance creeping into my voice, for dealing with your drunk ass. Which, for the record, is a full-time job. You attack everyone except me, in case you were wondering. Your bodyguard says I'm the only one who can calm you down. Luke stared at me, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. He just looked at me, like he was trying to see through me, like he was trying to figure out if I was lying. Then, suddenly, he laughed, a short, bitter sound. That's impossible, he said. I don't trust anyone, especially not strangers. Tell that to your drunk self, I said, turning to leave. He seems to think I'm some kind of safe harbor. As I reached for the door handle, Luke said, wait.